The sounds of wolves might make someone's hair prick up if caught alone in the woods at night. But surely there's nothing to fear if you're tucked away in a nice warm farmhouse. At least that's what the Martins thought before experiencing the most horrifying night of their lives. The Martins were overcome with hardships leading up to the incident. An injury occurring at the workplace had devastated Eric, and his wife Shelley had quit their job to take care of him. As a result, they were looking for a less expensive place to live. Seemingly, with luck at the time, Shelley had found a perfect older farm in Palmyra, Maine. It was surrounded by thick, dense woods. But this wasn't out of the ordinary for Eric's family. They had always been hunters and knew the woodlands well. The Martin household at the time consisted of Eric, Shelley, Eric's son Sean, and Shelley's daughter Chelsea. Eric, with his family's love of hunting inside of him, had a fairly extensive collection of guns. This was much to Shelley's dismay. As a compromise, Shelley allowed Eric to keep his firearms, but required them to be locked away inside of a detached barn near the new farmhouse. With the help of Eric's son Sean, Eric built a strong box to hold the guns inside of. As promised, they kept that strong box in their barn. After settling into their new home, Eric and Shelley had spent their night like many others, with a coffee in their hands and a relaxing lounge on their sheltered porch. They couldn't have known what was in store for them on that night. In the darkness of the woods, they noticed strange, pulsating lights well down past the tree line. At first, Sean thought it was just a poacher with a flashlight, but something just didn't seem right. Shelley felt a little more open-minded. She felt as though the lights were unnatural. So Eric and his son Sean headed out in the field to investigate. As they approached the woods, their lights went out. It was so quiet that night that the very snap of a tree branch underfoot had echoed through the trees. Eric sent Sean around with his flashlight off, hoping to catch any potential poacher. But soon something felt off to Eric. His instincts had flared up. He felt something so far beyond any fear that he had ever felt hunting. All Eric and Sean ended up finding was each other that night. Not even a single track on the ground had given them any hints at what they had seen. With that uneasy feeling now creeping inside of Eric, he decided to head back home. Some time had passed. Before too long, Shelley's daughter, Chelsea, had her boyfriend Nathan visit. Both of them decided to go for a walk in the woods with their dogs. A good bit into their walk, their dogs had jolted out ahead of them. They had seemingly caught the scent of something. When Chelsea and Nathan caught up to them, the dogs were rooting around a large hole in the ground. Nathan thought the overly round hole had been dug with care. Like Eric had felt some nights prior, Chelsea began to have a bad feeling about the whole situation. She urged Nathan to leave with her. He eventually agreed. At this point, it was becoming clear to the Martins that something strange was beginning to worm its way into their lives. They just didn't know what. More days had passed. Soon it was Memorial Day weekend. Shelley and Eric had enjoyed their holiday night much like they did most nights, with coffee in their hands and their backs to their chairs on their porch. Eric had tried to get their dogs to leave their pen for their nightly excursions, but the dogs refused. Eric knew something was wrong. That night had carried with it a heavy fog and worse, a crippling silence. This caused Eric to be on high alert. When his ears picked up an odd sound coming from the tree line across from their home, he felt his flight reaction kick in. Eric immediately ushered his wife into the house. She protested at first, but then she heard the same noise and looked towards the sound. Meeting her gaze was the reflective horrors of 5 sets of eyes looking back at her from the darkened woods. Now realizing the danger she was in, she fled with her husband back into their home and locked the door behind them. Eric combed through his knowledge as a hunter, wondering what those creatures could be. He knew they weren't bears, yet they were just as equally massive and just as predatory. So much so, in fact, that the safety of their home was called into question. The thin farmhouse walls no longer felt comforting. Eric wanted his firearms, but they were left inside the detached barn, just as he had promised his wife. He had ventured towards the door to brave the outside world, but Shelley had stopped him, begging him not to risk his life. Unsure of what else to do, Shelley ran up to her daughter's room in an attempt to wake Chelsea. Chelsea shrugged off her mother's warnings and returned to her slumber. Shelley peered outside her daughter's window into the misty fog below. It was there that she was met by the same 5 sets of eyes that she had seen earlier. One of the creatures even stood up on its hind legs like a mockery of a man and looked directly at Shelley in the window. Shelley immediately retreated from the frail glass. She hurriedly went through the house, closing the windows and locking them. She even stumbled upon the family's hunting dogs who were cowering in a corner, refusing to move. Meanwhile, Eric had felt an increasing level of drive to protect his family. With all the creatures still eerily watching in the distance, he thought that maybe he would be able to get to his car. If he could do that, he could just back it right up to the home and evacuate his loved ones. With his injury still in effect, Eric steeled his nerves and went outside. By the time Eric had reached his porch, he realized that it was going to be the longest 20 feet of his life. He started to slowly walk towards the car, attempting to keep as low of a profile as he could. When he finally reached the car door, he slid his hands in his pockets and attempted to find his keys. To his horror, the motion sensor lights had popped on. Eric was illuminated. He felt his vulnerability. Just off to his side, he heard the thumping of feet charging towards him. Eric chanced a glance and came face to face with one of the hulking wolf-like creatures. It tried reaching out one of its massive clawed hands into the light, but stopped just short. In an instant, the beast turned around and bolted off into the darkness. Fearing a retaliatory attack from its pack, Eric turned back towards his home and stumbled forward, as fast as his disability would allow him. After seeing that creature, the very metal body of his vehicle didn't seem safe enough to keep his family. After seeing that creature, it would merely be a metal coffin for them. After slamming the door behind him, he called out for his wife. They needed to call for aid. They attempted the police department, who gave them meager suggestions on how to stay safe within their homes. Despite their pleas, no one else was coming. They were on their own. Shelley felt the safest place would be upstairs. She set up a view from Chelsea's window. With her vantage point, she could see the whole farm. Eric remained downstairs, frustrated and upset. He had thought that maybe the creatures were repelled by the light. That would give him a shot to reach the barn for his weapons. Once more, he stepped outside. This time he activated the motion sensor light on purpose. The 5 beasts quickly darted around him. He watched their glowing eyes quickly surround the pool of light he was in. He began to feel silly even entertaining the thought he might be safe out there. They were hunting him. With a quick turn, he fled back into his home, the motion sensor light barely managing to stay active long enough for him to lock his door. Defeated and petrified, Eric joined Shelley in Chelsea's room. Together, they grabbed every makeshift weapon they could find within their home. Shelley forced Chelsea awake just to be an extra pair of hands. Whatever doubt Chelsea had in her half-awake stupor was cut down when the sounds of claws began wrapping their way around the wooden home. Large bangs and hefty scratches left the family horror-struck. To make matters worse, the creature somehow managed to jump on the second-story frame. Should they find a glass pane, and choose to, they could enter the home without any issue. The lumbering noises continued for what felt like hours. Even when they stopped, there was no telling if they were merely waiting outside, hiding in the dense fog. But as always, the sun eventually came. They could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The creatures were gone. Eric called Sean, who came over and helped look for tracks. The tracks they did find were huge with enormous claws. They even showed that these creatures could walk on 2 feet. The beasts of the woods had been hunting that night. Stalking. Nobody knows exactly what was out there that late night in Maine, but one thing is for certain. The Martin family bloodline had finally met their match. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It'd mean a lot to me. As always, until next time.